I never imagined a single phone call could shatter my entire world, let alone reveal the betrayal festering beneath my own family's roof. My name is Sarah Miller, and for years I believed I had a loving, supportive family. That belief, that bedrock of my existence, crumbled the day my mother called, her voice dripping with a sweetness I now recognize as pure poison. "Honey," she cooed, "your father and I have been talking. We think it's time you sold the house. Not our house, mind you. The home I'd inherited from my beloved grandmother. The only place I truly felt safe. But my house. The audacity, the sheer nerve of suggesting I liquidate my most cherished possession. The one thing tying me to my past, my roots, all for my sister. Resentment, a bitter, unfamiliar taste, flooded my mouth. My sister, Emily, always the golden child, always the one needing more, taking more. My parents saw her struggles as opportunities for me to sacrifice. This wasn't the first time, not by a long shot. Every holiday, every family gathering revolved around Emily's latest crisis, her newest financial pitfall. I worked tirelessly, saved every penny, built a life of quiet stability, while Emily, with her endless whims and fleeting careers, always came up short. And my parents, bless their hearts, always expected me to bridge the gap. But this time, it was different. This wasn't a small loan or a temporary helping hand. This was my home, the sanctuary I'd poured my soul into, the place where I envisioned raising my own family someday. This was a direct assault on my future, my independence, my very identity. Their reasoning? Emily needed a fresh start, a down payment for a new business venture that, let's be honest, would probably fail like all the others. They painted a picture of familial duty, of sisterly love, but all I heard was a thinly veiled demand. My blood ran cold, a slow, creeping realization that their love for me was conditional, always secondary to Emily's needs. The phone call ended with my polite, albeit strained, refusal. "I'm sorry, Mom," I said, my voice shaking, "but that's not an option." Her shocked silence was deafening, a prelude to the storm I knew was brewing. What I didn't know, what I couldn't possibly have conceived, was the depth of their deception. The very next day, a realtor's flyer appeared in my mailbox, emblazoned with a picture of my house, listed for sale. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. They hadn't just suggested it, they had already put the wheels in motion, behind my back, without my consent. Betrayal, sharp and agonizing, pierced through me. My own parents, the people who were supposed to protect me, had secretly conspired to sell my inheritance, my future, out from under me. The ground beneath my feet felt like quicksand. That flyer wasn't just paper, it was a declaration of war. It ignited a fire within me, an inferno of rage and a chilling determination. The quiet, compliant Sarah vanished, replaced by someone I barely recognized. My mind became a whirlwind of possibilities, each more intricate, more daring than the last. I started digging, pulling at every loose thread, every hushed conversation, every sideways glance. I became obsessed, a detective in my own life, meticulously piecing together the true extent of their scheme. I found hidden bank accounts, suspicious documents, and a trail of deceit that led straight back to my parents, and, yes, to Emily. The picture that emerged was far darker than I could have ever imagined, a web of lies spun so tightly it threatened to suffocate me. They thought I was weak, easily manipulated. They thought I would simply roll over and let them take what was mine. But what they didn't know, what they were about to discover, was that they had awakened something dormant within me, something fierce and unyielding. I wasn't just fighting for my house, I was fighting for my dignity, for the right to choose my own path, for the very essence of who I was. The moment of confrontation was coming, a reckoning they would never forget. The question wasn't if it would happen, but how. And when they finally faced the consequences of their actions, when they saw what I had done, their perfect little world would crumble. just as mine had. You won't believe the lengths I went to, the intricate plan I set in motion, to ensure that justice in its most unexpected and satisfying form would finally be served. The scent of pine and lemon polish still clung to the air in the house, a ghost of my mother's meticulous cleaning, even though she hadn't lived here for years. My name is Alara, and this house, this sanctuary, built by my own hands, was about to become a battleground. For decades, it had been my refuge, the only place where I truly felt safe, truly belonged. Now, my parents, the very people who should have championed my dreams, were determined to strip it all away, selling it out from under me for my sister, Bethany. The first hint of their betrayal came subtly, like a whisper in the wind. A casual comment from my mother during Sunday dinner. Bethany's struggling, Alara. Her new business isn't taking off like she'd hoped. I'd nodded, offered platitudes, completely oblivious to the insidious plan brewing beneath their saccharine smiles. Bethany, always the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, despite her string of failed ventures and endless financial woes. My parents had always coddled her, a stark contrast to the tough love, or rather, outright neglect I'd received. I built this house from the ground up, literally. After graduating from architecture school, while Bethany was flitting from one artistic endeavor to another, I poured every ounce of my savings, every drop of my sweat, into this land. I designed every beam, laid every brick, stained every plank of wood. It wasn't just a house, it was a testament to my resilience, my independence. It was the only thing I owned that was truly mine, untainted by their expectations or comparisons. The sprawling oak in the front yard, the one I'd planted as a sapling, now towered over the roof, its branches a protective canopy. Every memory, every struggle, every triumph was etched into these walls. The first overt attack arrived in the form of a certified letter, a stark white envelope that felt heavy with impending doom. I remember the exact moment I opened it, standing in my sun-drenched kitchen, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee suddenly turning bitter in my mouth. It was from a real estate agent, a formal inquiry about potential interest in listing your property at 1422 Willow Creek Lane. My property, my house. The address was undeniably mine. My hands trembled, the paper rustling like dry leaves. This wasn't a mistake. This was a declaration of war. I confronted my parents that evening, my voice a tight wire of barely suppressed fury. What is this, Mom? Dad? A real estate agent contacted me about selling my house. My father, usually so boisterous, shrunk into his armchair, fiddling with his reading glasses. My mother, however, met my gaze with an unsettling calm. Alara, we need to talk. Bethany needs help, serious help. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. Bethany, always Bethany. My blood ran cold, a familiar chill I'd known since childhood. Help with what? I demanded, my voice rising. What does Bethany's help have to do with my house? That's when my mother delivered the crushing blow, her voice devoid of any warmth. Your father and I have decided to sell the house, Alara. The proceeds will go to Bethany. She needs a fresh start, a proper investment for her new gallery. My jaw went slack, the audacity, the sheer nerve of them, to even suggest such a thing, let alone enact it without a word. The house wasn't just bricks and mortar. It was my identity, my future. A searing pain shot through me, a betrayal so profound it felt physical. You can't do that. This is my house. I built it. I own it. My father finally spoke, his voice weak, apologetic. Technically, Alara, the land was always in our name. We allowed you to build on it, but the deed is still ours. The words hit me like a physical blow. The land, the foundation, the very ground beneath my feet, not truly mine. They had held this card, this ultimate power, over me all these years, and I had been too naive, too trusting, to ever question it. My mother continued, her tone softening, almost condescending. We know how much you love the house, dear. But Bethany's needs are greater right now. You're so capable, Alara. You can always build another. The casual cruelty of her words, the absolute disregard for my feelings, ignited a spark of something dark and dangerous within me. Build another? As if a home was a disposable commodity, easily replaced. As if my years of labor, my dreams, meant nothing. I felt a primal scream building in my chest, but I swallowed it, forcing a calm I didn't feel. You want to sell my home to fund Bethany's latest pipe dream? My voice was low, laced with a venom I hadn't known I possessed. You're going to take everything from me? For her? My mother sighed, a theatrical gesture of exasperation. Don't be so dramatic, Alara. It's for the best. You'll thank us later. Thank them. The thought was ludicrous, insulting. The resentment that had simmered beneath the surface for years, fueled by their favoritism, their constant comparisons, now erupted into a raging inferno. This wasn't just about the house anymore. This was about a lifetime of being second best, of being overlooked and undervalued. This was about their blatant disregard for my happiness, my very existence, in favor of their perpetually struggling golden child. I looked at my parents, their faces etched with a strange mix of pity and determination, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that I would not let them win. This house, my house, would not be sacrificed for Bethany's fleeting whims. Not without a fight, not without consequences. The certified letter, an official document demanding my presence in court, became a chilling prophecy of the battle ahead. It wasn't just a piece of paper, it was a gauntlet thrown down, a declaration of war on everything I had built. My parents, those supposed pillars of support, had twisted the very legal system to their will, using it as a weapon to dispossess me. The audacity of it, the sheer unadulterated gall, sent a cold shock through my veins. They were not merely asking, they were attempting to seize. I remember staring at the sterile black ink on the page, the legalese blurring into an incomprehensible threat. This wasn't a family dispute anymore, it was a calculated assault. The document stated their intention to claim the house under an obscure clause related to unfulfilled familial obligations and financial dependence. Their argument, as preposterous as it sounded, was that since Bethany, their golden child, was struggling financially, and since I, their eldest daughter, was financially stable, I had a moral and familial duty to provide for her by liquidating my most significant asset. It was a twisted logic, designed to exploit my independence and punish me for my success. My first instinct was to call them, to scream, to demand an explanation for this outrageous betrayal. But a deeper, colder part of me held back. Their faces, etched with that strange mix of pity and determination during our last conversation, replayed in my mind. They weren't open to reason. They had already made their decision, and this letter was merely the execution of their predetermined plan. Talking would be futile. It would only give them more ammunition, more insight into my emotional state. Instead, I sought counsel. I found a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Sarah, who listened patiently as I recounted years of parental favoritism towards Bethany, the constant comparisons, the subtle digs at my ambition, and now, this outright attempt to steal my home. Sarah's expression remained unreadable, but I saw a flicker of indignation in her eyes when I described their legal maneuver. She confirmed my fears. While their claim was weak, it wasn't entirely baseless. They were relying on emotional manipulation, an skewed interpretation of family law, hoping to wear me down, to force my hand through sheer exhaustion and financial strain. The initial consultation felt like a therapy session, unearthing years of buried resentment. I spoke of Bethany, always the center of their universe, her every whim indulged, her every failure excused. I recounted how, while I was working 3 jobs to put myself through architecture school, Bethany was jet-setting on their dime, pursuing one passion project after another, each one inevitably crumbling. My parents had always seen my hard work as a given, a natural extension of my being, while Bethany's sporadic efforts were celebrated as monumental achievements. This house, my sanctuary, was the culmination of my unacknowledged struggles, my silent victories, And now they wanted to hand it over to her, to prop up her latest failed venture. The injustice of it burned a hole in my soul. The legal process began, slow and agonizing. Each court document, each official communication, felt like a fresh wound. My parents, through their lawyer, painted a picture of me as an unfeeling, selfish daughter, hoarding my wealth while my poor, struggling sister languished. They exaggerated Bethany's financial woes, fabricating a narrative of impending destitution, all to justify their predatory claim on my property. The emotional toll was immense. Sleep became a luxury, replaced by restless nights spent staring at the ceiling, replaying conversations, strategizing counterarguments. The very air in my home, once a source of comfort, now felt thick with the tension of impending battle. One afternoon, a package arrived. It wasn't from my parents or their lawyers. It was from Bethany. Inside, nestled amongst tissue paper, was a framed photograph. It was an old picture, taken years ago, of Bethany and me as children, sitting on the porch of this very house, laughing. A small, handwritten note accompanied it. "Remember the good times, Alara? This house holds so many memories." It would be a shame to lose them. My blood ran cold. It wasn't a plea, it was a thinly veiled threat, a reminder that she was fully aware of their scheme, and perhaps even complicit. The sentimentality was a cruel mockery, a twisted attempt to guilt-trip me into surrender. That photograph, with its saccharine facade, solidified my resolve. This wasn't just about property anymore, it was about reclaiming my narrative, asserting my worth, and finally, unequivocally, standing up for myself against decades of emotional manipulation. They wanted to use my home as a pawn in their game of parental favoritism. I would turn the chessboard over. I would show them that this daughter, the one they had always overlooked, was not to be trifled with. The resentment I had harbored for so long solidified into a cold, hard determination. They had chosen to make an enemy of me, and they would soon discover the full consequences of that decision. This fight, I realized, would be a reckoning. The certified letter had been merely the opening salvo, a formal declaration of war. What followed was a campaign of psychological warfare, subtle at first, then increasingly brazen. My parents, particularly my mother, began a relentless barrage of calls and texts, each one a thinly veiled attempt to chip away at my resolve. They spoke of Bethany's fragile state, her desperate need, painting a picture of a sister teetering on the brink of financial ruin, all while conveniently omitting the part where her struggles were entirely self-inflicted. They invoked every ounce of familial guilt they could muster, reminding me of all the sacrifices they had made, the unconditional love they had supposedly showered upon me. Their words, once capable of twisting my gut into knots, now bounced off a shield of steely indifference. The resentment had truly hardened into something far more formidable. I had always been the pragmatic one, the planner, the one who saw problems and sought solutions. My parents, however, saw my practicality as coldness, my independence as defiance. They had always preferred Bethany's dramatic flair, her endless string of artistic pursuits that never quite materialized into anything sustainable. Now, they were weaponizing that preference, using it to justify their blatant favoritism. They genuinely believed I owed Bethany this house, not as a gift, but as a debt for being the less favored child. The sheer audacity of their entitlement was breathtaking. I started to document everything, every call, every text, every passive-aggressive comment. I knew this wasn't just about a house anymore, it was about reclaiming my narrative, about proving to them and to myself that I was not a pawn in their twisted game. The legal battle began in earnest with my initial consultation. Mr. Henderson, a sharp, no-nonsense attorney with a reputation for handling contentious family disputes, listened patiently as I laid out the convoluted history of my family and the house. His office, filled with towering stacks of legal tomes and the scent of old paper, felt like a sanctuary of logic in the storm of my emotional turmoil. He confirmed my fears. Their claim, while audacious, wasn't entirely baseless. The house had been built on land my parents technically still held the deed to, a detail I had overlooked in my youthful zeal to build my dream. A crushing blow, but not a fatal one. We would fight it, he assured me, but it would be a brutal, drawn-out affair. The cost, both financial and emotional, would be immense. But I was ready. My resolve deepened. I spent countless hours poring over old financial records, receipts for every nail, every plank, every hour of labor I had poured into that house. I unearthed old photographs, documenting the construction from its very foundations, images of me, younger, sweat-stained, but beaming with pride. Each piece of evidence was a testament to my ownership, a rebuttal to their claims. This wasn't just about money, it was about identity. This house was me, and I was not about to let them dismantle myself. The thought of Bethany, with her, entitled smirk, strolling through the home I had built, filled me with a cold fury. Then came the anonymous threats. Not direct but insidious. A deflated tire on my car, a broken window in the shed, a dead rosebush in my meticulously kept garden. Nothing overtly traceable, but the message was clear. Someone was trying to intimidate me. I immediately suspected Bethany, or my parents acting on her behalf. They were escalating, moving beyond legal maneuvers into something far more sinister. The fear was a cold knot in my stomach, but it was quickly overshadowed by a burning indignation. They wanted to scare me? They wanted to break me? They had no idea who they were dealing with. This was no longer just about property. It was about personal safety, about defending my sanctuary from a family that had become a threat. I installed a state-of-the-art security system. Cameras covering every angle, motion sensors, reinforced locks. I started carrying pepper spray, a small, cold comfort in my pocket. I confided in a few trusted friends, sharing the sordid details of my family's betrayal. Their outrage fueled my own, validating my decision to fight back with every fiber of my being. This wasn't just my fight anymore. It was a testament to the fact that you can, to let people walk all over you, especially not family who should know better. The obsession with justice, with proving them wrong, consumed me. Sleep became a luxury, my mind constantly replaying scenarios, strategizing, anticipating their next move. The house, once a haven, now felt like a fortress under siege. My parents, meanwhile, continued their public charade of concern, spreading rumors through our extended family and social circles about my supposed selfishness, my lack of compassion for my struggling sister, Bethany. They painted me as the villain, the heartless one who would rather see her own sister homeless than part with a material possession. The whispers reached me, stinging but ultimately strengthening my resolve. I knew the truth, and soon, everyone else would too. I refused to be gaslit, refused to let them control the narrative. This wasn't a game of public opinion, it was a battle for my life, my dignity, my home. The upcoming court date loomed large, a terrifying yet exhilarating prospect. It would be the first real confrontation, the first time we would all stand before an impartial arbiter, and I intended to be ready. The courtroom's sterile air offered no comfort, only a chilling reminder of the battle ahead. My parents sat across the aisle, their faces carefully neutral, a practiced mask of wounded innocence. Bethany, my sister, fidgeted beside them, her eyes darting between me and the judge, a flicker of something I couldn't quite decipher playing in their depths. This wasn't just about a house anymore, it was about every slight, every injustice, every time I had been overlooked in favor of the golden child. The certified letter had been the opening salvo, but today was the full-blown war. My lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Miss Davies, leaned over, whispering a final reassurance. I barely heard her, my gaze fixed on my parents. How could they stand there, so composed, knowing the depths of their deceit? I had spent sleepless nights poring over documents, digging through old emails, unearthing every scrap of evidence that proved this house was mine, built by my own hands, paid for with my own sweat and tears. The deed, the architectural plans I'd drawn, the receipts for every nail and plank, They were all laid out on the table before me, a physical manifestation of my fight. The judge, a stern-faced man with tired eyes, called the court to order. My parents' lawyer, a slick, expensive-looking individual, began his opening statement, painting a picture of me as an ungrateful daughter, selfishly withholding a family asset from my struggling sister. He spoke of my parents' boundless generosity, their desire to help Bethany, their youngest, most vulnerable child. Each word was a fresh wound, twisting the knife of their long-standing favoritism. I felt a familiar heat rise in my chest, a potent mix of anger and hurt that had simmered for decades. Then it was our turn. Ms. Davies spoke with quiet authority, laying out the timeline of my life, my dedication to building this home, the financial records that proved my sole investment. She presented the deed, signed and notarized, clearly stating my ownership. The air in the courtroom thickened with unspoken tension. I watched my parents' faces, searching for a crack in their facade, a hint of shame, but found only a hardening resolve. Bethany, however, seemed to shrink in her seat, her gaze now fixed on the floor. The first real shock came during my father's testimony. Under cross-examination, Miss Davies cornered him about a loan he had allegedly given me for the house. He faltered, stammered, unable to produce any documentation. My heart pounded. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. The narrative of their benevolent support was beginning to unravel. I saw a fleeting look of panic in my mother's eyes, quickly masked. Then came the bombshell. Miss Davies produced an old faded letter, a handwritten note from my mother to Bethany, dating back several years. The judge took it, his brow furrowing as he read. The words, though not spoken aloud, hung in the air, heavy with implication. It was a confession, a promise from my mother to Bethany that the house would eventually be hers, a gift from the family, regardless of my efforts. My mother's face went ashen, her carefully constructed composure finally shattering. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Bethany looked up, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and something akin to guilt. I remembered that letter, a vague memory of my mother writing something to Bethany around the time I was breaking ground on the house. I had dismissed it as another one of their private exchanges, never imagining it was a blueprint for betrayal. The judge's voice cut through the silence, sharp and clear. He declared a short recess, the weight of this new evidence clearly shifting the balance. As people shuffled out, I saw Bethany quickly stand and move towards the exit, avoiding eye contact. My parents, however, remained rooted, their eyes fixed on me, a raw, venomous hatred now openly displayed. The mask was gone. The hurt of their betrayal was suddenly overshadowed by a surge of cold fury. They weren't just trying to take my house. They were trying to erase my existence, my accomplishments, everything I had built. This was more than just a legal battle. It was a fight for my very identity. And I would not back down. The courtroom felt sterile, a stark contrast to the wild, untamed fury that raged within me. Every breath I took was a conscious effort, a fight against the tremor that threatened to shake my voice. My parents sat across the aisle, their faces carefully neutral, a practiced mask of innocence that I now saw through with chilling clarity. Bethany, my sister, the supposed victim in all of this, was conspicuously absent. Her absence spoke volumes, a silent admission of her complicity, her unwillingness to face the consequences of her actions. My lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Albright, laid out our case with surgical precision. She presented the original deed, the meticulous records of every payment I had made, every repair, every improvement to the house. She showed photographs of me, a young woman with dirt under her fingernails and a hopeful glint in her eyes, building my home brick by painstaking brick. Then came the emails, the text messages, the carefully orchestrated campaign of pressure and manipulation from my parents, all designed to convince me to sign away my property. The judge, a stoic woman with kind eyes, listened intently, her gaze occasionally flicking to my parents, then back to me. When it was my turn to speak, a hush fell over the room. I looked directly at my parents, their eyes finally meeting mine, devoid of their usual saccharine sweetness. For years, I began, my voice surprisingly steady, this house was not just a structure. It was my identity. It was proof that I could build something, create something beautiful and lasting, despite the constant comparisons, despite always being told I wasn't enough. My voice cracked slightly, but I pushed through, fueled by the raw emotion that had been simmering for so long. You always told me Bethany needed more, that she deserved more. But what about what I needed? What about what I earned? My mother flinched, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement, but I saw it. My father's jaw tightened. You wanted to sell my home, I continued, the words now coming with a fierce, unyielding rhythm. The home I built with my own hands, to prop up Bethany's latest failed venture. You didn't just want the house. You wanted to erase me. You wanted to pretend I never achieved anything, that I was still the overlooked child, always in Bethany's shadow. The accusation hung heavy in the air, a truth they could no longer deny. Ms. Albright then presented the final, damning piece of evidence. A recording I had secretly made of a conversation with my mother. In it, her voice, usually so controlled, was laced with frustration. Bethany needs this, Alara, she'd pleaded, her voice rising. She's your sister. You owe her this. You always have to be so difficult, always have to stand in her way. Then, the chilling part, we'll just say you signed it over. Who's going to question it? It's family. The words echoed through the silent courtroom, a stark testament to their deceit. My parents' faces went ashen. Their carefully constructed facade crumbled, revealing the desperate, manipulative individuals beneath. The judge called for a recess, her expression unreadable. During the break, my parents approached me, their usual bluster replaced by a desperate, almost pathetic plea. Alara, please, my mother whispered, her eyes red-rimmed. Don't do this. Think of the family. My father stood beside her, his arms crossed, a silent threat in his posture. This is going too far, he grumbled, his voice low and dangerous. I looked at them, truly looked at them, and saw not the loving parents I had once yearned for, but two strangers consumed by their own desires and prejudices. The family? I asked, my voice cold, devoid of the warmth I had once offered them. You destroyed the family when you tried to steal my home. You destroyed it when you chose Bethany over me, again and again. I turned my back on them, the conversation finished. When court resumed, the judge delivered her verdict with a calm, authoritative voice. She meticulously outlined the evidence, the clear attempts at coercion, the fraudulent claims. She ruled unequivocally in my favor. The house was mine, legally and without dispute. Furthermore, she ordered my parents to pay for all my legal fees, citing their malicious intent. A wave of relief, so profound it almost buckled my knees, washed over me. It wasn't just about the house. It was about validation, about finally being seen, finally being heard. As the gavel struck, the sound reverberated through the courtroom, a final, definitive punctuation mark on years of silent suffering. My parents stared at me, their faces contorted in a mixture of shock and incandescent rage. They had lost. Not just the house, but their control. Their carefully constructed narrative of the golden child and the difficult one. I had faced them, head on, and I had won. It was a victory, undeniably. But as I walked out of that courtroom, the sunlight blinding me for a moment, a profound sadness settled over me. The house was safe, my identity affirmed, but the cost had been everything else. The family I had once longed for was irrevocably shattered. The silence of their absence, their absolute rejection of me, was a heavy burden, a bitter taste in the mouth of victory. The fight was over, but the scars would remain. The profound sadness that had settled over me after the courtroom victory didn't lift. It clung to me, a persistent shadow, even as I walked through the familiar rooms of my house, now undeniably mine. The fight was over, but the scars remained, raw and unhealed. My parents' absolute rejection, their silence, was a constant echo in the quiet halls. Bethany's absence, too, was a stark reminder of the chasm that had opened between us. This house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a monument to what I had lost. I tried to resume my life, to find solace in the routines that had always grounded me. I worked on new architectural designs. Each line I drew a deliberate act of rebuilding. But the joy, the passion I once felt, was muted. Every evening, as dusk painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, a profound loneliness would descend. I'd sit on the porch swing, the one I'd built with my own hands, and stare out at the sprawling oak, its branches a protective canopy. It felt less like protection and more like a cage, isolating me from a world that once included a family. One crisp autumn afternoon, a letter arrived, not certified this time but a simple envelope, addressed in a familiar, almost forgotten hand. It was from Bethany. My heart hammered against my ribs, a strange mix of dread and a flicker of hope. I tore it open, my fingers trembling slightly. The words blurred at first, then coalesced into a confession, a plea. She wrote of her own struggles, not just financially, but emotionally. She admitted to the constant pressure from our parents, the expectation to be perfect, to always succeed. She spoke of her jealousy, a corrosive envy that had festered for years, fueled by their comparisons. She apologized, not for the first time, but this time it felt different, devoid of the usual self-pity. There was a raw honesty in her words, a vulnerability I had never seen from her before. She detailed the extent of our parents' manipulation, how they had twisted her desperation into a weapon against me. She recounted their insistence that the house was the only solution, painting me as selfish for not readily giving it up. It wasn't an excuse, she emphasized, but an explanation. She expressed a deep regret for her role in their scheme, for allowing herself to be used, for hurting me. The letter ended with a tentative offer, an apology in person, if I would ever consider it. I reread the letter countless times, the words etching themselves into my memory. The anger, the hurt, the betrayal, all still simmered beneath the surface, but something else began to stir within me, understanding. For the first time, I saw Bethany not just as the golden child, but as a person, flawed and struggling, caught in the same web of parental expectations that had defined my own life, albeit in a different way. We were both victims of their toxic dynamic, just with different roles. The decision was not easy. Every fiber of my being screamed for self-preservation, for the safety of my carefully constructed solitude. But the thought of a lifetime of estrangement, of never truly knowing peace, weighed heavily on me. The house was mine, yes, but what good was a fortress if it held only one person? I thought of the sprawling oak, how it had weathered countless storms, its roots intertwined deep within the earth. Perhaps, like the tree, our roots, though damaged, could still find a way to connect, to heal. I wrote back, a short, carefully worded response. I didn't offer immediate forgiveness, but I didn't close the door either. I suggested a meeting, not at my house, not yet, but in a neutral space, a small coffee shop in a neighboring town. The day of our meeting arrived, and my stomach churned with a mixture of apprehension and a fragile hope. When Bethany walked in, her eyes wide with trepidation, I saw a reflection of my own vulnerability. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic apologies. Just a quiet conversation, slow and tentative, as we navigated the wreckage of our past. We spoke of our parents, their expectations, the ways we had both been shaped and scarred by their influence. It was a long, arduous process, not a sudden reconciliation, but a gradual rebuilding of trust, brick by painstaking brick. We met again and again, slowly peeling back the layers of hurt and resentment. We found common ground in shared memories, in the understanding of a childhood shaped by the same complex forces. The scars remained, a testament to the battles fought, but they began to fade, softened by the balm of shared experience and genuine remorse. My parents, in their rigid refusal to acknowledge their part, remained in their own isolated world. But for Bethany and me, a new chapter had begun. The house, my sanctuary, no longer felt like a lonely triumph, but a foundation upon which something new, something stronger, could finally be built. The fight was over, and the healing, though slow, had finally begun. The silence in the courtroom was deafening, a thick blanket of anticipation that pressed down on everyone. Every eye was on my parents, their faces pale and drawn, as the judge delivered his verdict. The accusations I'd brought against them, the meticulously gathered evidence of their attempts to defraud me of my own property, had been laid bare. It wasn't about the money anymore, not entirely. It was about the betrayal, the deep, agonizing cut of realizing the people who should have protected me were actively trying to dismantle my life for my sister's benefit. I remembered the day I first discovered their scheme, the knot of resentment tightening in my stomach. It had started subtly, with casual suggestions about selling the house, then escalating to veiled threats about my sister's supposed financial struggles. My obsession had grown from there, fueled by a burning need to uncover the truth. I had spent countless nights poring over documents, recording conversations, and piecing together their insidious plan. Each discovery felt like another twist of the knife, deepening the wound of their betrayal. Now, as the judge's voice resonated through the room, pronouncing them guilty of attempted fraud, a strange mix of emotions washed over me. There was no triumphant cheer, no surge of vindication. Instead, a profound sadness settled in my chest. This wasn't the joyous victory I had imagined during those sleepless nights. It was the quiet, hollow ache of a family irrevocably broken. My parents, once pillars of my world, now stood condemned, not just by the law, but by their own actions. My sister Sarah sat in the back row, her face a mask of shame and disbelief. She hadn't been directly involved in the fraud, but her perceived need had been the catalyst, the excuse my parents used to justify their deceit. I knew she was hurting, perhaps even more than I was, grappling with the reality of her parents' crimes and the role she inadvertently played. Our relationship, already strained, felt like a fragile piece of glass, shattered beyond repair. As the judge handed down their sentence, a period of probation and significant financial penalties, I saw my mother's shoulders slump. My father, usually so stoic, ran a hand through his thinning hair, his eyes vacant. They didn't look at me. They couldn't. The weight of their choices, the full gravity of their deception, had finally crushed them. Leaving the courthouse, the crisp autumn air felt like a shock to my system. The world outside seemed indifferent to the earthquake that had just rocked my life. I walked past the bustling streets, the honking cars, the indifferent faces, feeling a profound sense of isolation. The house, my sanctuary, now felt heavy with the ghosts of their betrayal. A few weeks later, I received a letter from my mother. It was short, handwritten, and tear-stained. She didn't apologize for the fraud, not directly. Instead, she spoke of regret, of misguided intentions, of a desperate attempt to protect Sarah, however flawed. It wasn't the full admission of guilt I might have once craved, but it was a crack in the wall, a faint glimmer of human vulnerability. I didn't respond. I couldn't. The wounds were too fresh, the scars too deep. But as I reread her words, I felt a tiny shift within me. The burning resentment, the obsessive need for retribution, had begun to cool, replaced by a weary acceptance. Justice had been served, but it hadn't brought back the family I once had, nor the innocence I'd lost. I decided to sell the house. It was a painful decision, but staying there felt like living in a constant echo of their deceit. I needed a fresh start, a space untainted by their shadow. With the proceeds, I bought a smaller place across the state, a quiet cottage with a sprawling garden. It was a place where I could rebuild, not just my life, but my sense of self. The journey had been brutal, leaving me with scars that would never fully fade. But through it all, I had learned a profound truth. Some battles, even when won, leave you with a bittersweet taste. The justice I sought came at the cost of my family, a price I was still struggling to comprehend. Yet, in the quiet solitude of my new home, surrounded by the nascent blooms of my garden, I found a fragile peace. I was free, finally free, to forge my own path, unburdened by their choices, and to heal in my own time. The future remained uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like it truly belonged to me.